Well, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm so glad to be here with you today. And sometimes when it rains outside like it is this morning, people complain, oh, it's so messy looking out there. But I think it's a great thing when it rains. The abundance of rain is a good thing. It represents a cleansing. It represents a washing. It represents a blessing. And, I think that speaks to the fact that we've gone from a liberal Democrat in the White House to a conservative Republican. And the fact that this rain is here and this washing and we're doing things new. We're restoring our country to the fundamental and foundation principles that has made the nation great. And as Donald Trump talked about, we make America great again. Unfortunately, we're having to make it great again because of the left and their push towards growing and focusing on big government instead of the people that work hard and make sacrifices and allow the government to do what it does. So I want to start, and there's so many people here that I know already because I'm not new to the party. I'm not having to introduce myself for the first time to the Georgia Republican Party and the grassroots around our state with its 159 counties. But for those of you that I haven't met before, I just want to share a little bit about my background, who I am, where I've come from. I'm a Georgia native. I'm from a little town called Wrens, Georgia, W-R-N-N-S, in Jefferson County. About 2,000 people there. It's near Augusta, and I loved growing up there. And I had two wonderful parents, a mother and father, who raised me and helped me to be the man that I am today. And I think that it's important, you have to say it nowadays, that I'm a Republican, but more importantly, I'm a conservative, both fiscally and socially. And one of the issues that's very near and dear to my heart is the right to life, protecting the unborn, because my mother and father adopted me at 9 months old. And if they hadn't done that, I wouldn't be here today, and it's a blessing. It's a blessing. So my birth mother made the right choice, and I'm so glad. And we have to continue to advocate for those that don't have a voice so that they can grow up and they can be the men and women that God has called them to be and to do the things that He's called them to do. And an example from the fiscal side, I remember getting my first car, and I just expected mom and dad to pay for everything, buy the car, the insurance, the gas, the whole thing. Because, that's what parents are supposed to do. I'm not supposed to have to do anything, right? But my mother and father, being good fiscal conservatives, said, look, son, we will help you, but we will not do it for you. You've got to have a job, and you've got to pay for this gas, and you've got to get the oil change, and you've got to make sure that when the car gets out of alignment, you've got to go get it realigned, and you've got to focus on the tires, looking at the tread, and taking care of all those things. So they would not allow me to be taken care of. I had to make my own way. And that's what we have to do. And everybody's got a background. Everybody's got a sad story. Something didn't go right in their lives at one point in time. But that should not keep you from becoming who you need to be, who you're supposed to be. And that is done primarily by the decisions that you make. And we have an opportunity right here now in this delegate cycle to make a decision, and that decision should be made by the grassroots, for the grassroots, with the grassroots. I focus so much in my life, and we focus as Republicans on God and country. I served in the Georgia Army National Guard. I'm proud to say I'm an Eagle Scout. I was a police officer for 14 years in Metro Atlanta. I'm currently an executive with the Georgia Department of Juvenile Justice. I've been responsible for a budget as little as $7 million and upwards to $35 and $40 million. So, the money came in and it had been allocated to our agency, and then it's important that we have to be good stewards over that and make decisions about how things should be prioritized. And make sure that we're maximizing the goals that we have, and that starts with a vision. I'm so happy to live so near this particular meeting, because I'm often traveling so far. I was up in Walker County, and that was about a 2.5-hour drive. But my wife Jennifer and I live in Villa Rica, So needless to say, that was a much shorter ride this morning. And it's nice to be able to do that every now and then. But I'm so glad to be here. I'm the first vice chair currently of the Georgia Republican Party. I served as third and first vice chair of the Douglas County Republican Party. I was also the political director for the Georgia Young Republicans. I was the chairman of the Georgia Black Republican Council. And so again, I'm not new to being involved in the party and rolling up my sleeves, making phone calls, going door to door, helping to raise money and also giving of my own money, working with the men and women across our state to do the things we need to do to keep our state red, but more importantly, to free men and women and families to make their own choices about how they want to live. And so we heard about and we watched the inauguration yesterday, and what a relief, right? You know, I've been so accustomed these last 8 years of when you think about the White House, you think Obama. When you think about Obama, you think about the White House. And now when you look at the White House, now when you think about the leadership that's making decisions in Washington, now we can take a little breath there. But the thing is that we can take that breath and celebrate it as we did yesterday, but we have to realize that we cannot let our guard down. And it's like a perpetual tug of war. Republicans are pulling on one side, Democrats are pulling on the other, and if we ever let that rope go, then our country loses. And you heard Barack Obama say he and his family were going on vacation, but where are they coming back to? Washington, D.C. They're going to be right there. And Obama said in the tweet, he said, we're going to come back and we're going to go to work. Well, what does that mean? You're not the president anymore. So to me, that gives me grave concern. And even here in Georgia, the Democrats are not going to just sit back and say, well, Republicans have the governor's office and the House and the Senate and all these other things. They're going to fight. And we're going to fight. But the big difference is that we have the right ideas on our side, the principles that we believe in to move things forward. And, you know, one thing that I noticed, and we all noticed this, that in the presidential cycle that we all each had different candidates. You know, that there's some people in the room that were with Trump the whole time. There were others that supported other candidates. And I'll admit to you that in the primary, I supported Ted Cruz. But when the majority of the people said that Donald J. Trump was our nominee, I stopped talking about Ted Cruz. It was time to come together and focus on the individual that was going to best represent our values. And Donald J. Trump won. And he won states that we didn't think he was going to win. Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. He won North Carolina and Florida, all of these states. And it was a referendum on the liberal agenda that had been promoted for all these years. And he won. But there are some people that weren't willing to get on board. And that's unfortunate. And let me tell you, leadership has to show the example that you're going to support the nominee. And I can tell you that of the folks that I know that are running, I dare you to find a picture where they had a Trump-Pence sign behind them speaking about supporting Donald J. Trump like I did. When Hillary Clinton was suggesting that Trump was a part of the Klan, I worked with the Trump campaign here in Georgia, put out a press release and said, that's ridiculous. Put my name to it because I support Donald J. Trump. At the fish fry down in Perry, Georgia, I was on the stage talking about why I supported Donald J. Trump, a businessman, somebody that's going to nominate Supreme Court justices that will reflect our values, reflect what the founders wanted for this country. And I talked on and on about that. Sandy Springs, the headquarters here in the Atlanta area, got on stage and talked about why I was supporting them and did it without shame, did it proudly. And that's what our leadership has to do. We have to be united. We have to show that we are going to stand with our candidates. And then when people see that, then that helps people to coalesce and come together and do that. Another thing about leadership is that you have to be able to bring people together. And there's no perfect world. There's always going to be some fights and some contention. But I can tell you when I ran for first vice chair the first time, there were people that supported our current chair, John Padgett, that voted for me. There were people that supported Alex Johnson, who voted for me. There were people that supported B.J. Van Gundy that supported me. And leadership has to be able to bring people together. And a huge part of that is listening. And not just listening, but incorporating what you're hearing into what you do and who you are as a leader representing the Georgia Republican Party. And making sure every Republican feels the value, because you know you're valuable, but your leadership needs to know that and reflect that. And so when we talk about where we're going in the future, we need to have training. We're about to start this delegate process. Precinct mass meetings, the majority of them are going to be on February 11th. But how many people have never been a part of that process and need training to understand how it all works? Now, I remember when I was a delegate for the first time and nobody knew my name and I didn't understand the process. I just went in and tried to listen and pay attention and ask questions. But in order to bring more people in, we need to have that training in place so that they know exactly how to be involved. And we need our candidates that are running as Republicans to be trained. How much does it cost to run for a particular office? What are the deadlines? Giving them the resources on the demographics in their area, working with them to be successful. And that's one of the things that I heard people talk about. Well, I can, as far as fundraising goes, I can just give to the candidate. Well, you can, but understand if the Georgia Republican Party is focused on helping Republicans get elected at all levels. If the chairman of the party has a hand on the pulse of what's going on here in Paulding County, and we know the seats that we need to defend, we know the ones that are competitive that we could pick up and working with our local Republican Party, then they're more likely to give to the party because they know the state party is investing in the local Republican parties. And I mentioned that, there are a lot of new people, a lot of folks that supported Trump that weren't involved in the party. We need to keep them here. We don't need to just say, hey, come back in 4 years and we'll help get Trump elected again. We need them to be involved now, and we need to bring the people back that maybe supported another candidate. Bring them back, make sure they're involved. And it has to be a partnership. There is no man or woman that's an island unto themselves. Anyone that's ever done anything great has not done it alone. So when we talk about growing our party, which we have to do with millennials and with the minority communities, with people that supported Trump, people that have been here for years, we have to work together. And so when we talk about where we're going in the future and when candidates come and talk to you about the party, they're going to have ideas. Like I talked about the training to you. But also we need to be talking about how do we help you. And when we have meetings, we have executive committee meetings and state committee meetings, and some of them will be in Atlanta. But understand, they don't need to all be up there. We need to come to you and come to your county party meetings. And when we talk about those Republicans that we want to help get elected, you know the communities that are out here. You know the streets. You know the subdivisions. How do we grow the party and work with people that aren't with us today, millennials and a lot of young people, minorities and others? Well, where do we need to go in your community to connect with those individuals? Where are the churches that we need to go and visit? What are your ideas about the strategy, and marry what we're doing at the state party with what you're doing right here? Fundraising. You all know the state party is not in a good place with our fundraising. We're several hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt right now. A lot of that coming from a lawsuit, a racial discrimination lawsuit, quite frankly. And one that's still outstanding, that has to be taken care of and closed out and done away with, finished. And we talk about political action committees and the competitiveness of the dollars that people give. But listen, people don't just give just because somebody told them to give. They give because they're investing. What is it that they see? What is it that they hear from the organization that they're writing the checks for? Does the state Republican Party have a vision, and one that is being communicated effectively? Do we have professionals in place within the staff that are responsive when you call and send emails? That when we have special elections, that we're doing the reporting of the paperwork to the Secretary of State's office on time? When we get the monies that come in, are we being good stewards of those dollars? Are there ways that we can reduce the amount of money that's going out every month? Can we look at where our party headquarters is located and say, can we get a better deal somewhere else? Donald Trump has talked about, hey, we need to look at these trade agreements and let's see if it's really in our best interest. Let's look and see if what we're doing right now is really in our best interest, or can we do it better? And having a plan to reduce the debt, just like in our own homes. If you've got debt, then you say, okay, here's how much I'm bringing in each month. Here is the amount of debt that I have. Now let's see, when I want this debt paid off, how much do I need to allocate every month to help paying that off? We don't have a plan like that right now, and we need it. So as we're raising the money, we're also reducing the debt, because you could raise $1 billion. But if you spend $2 billion, then you're in debt. So we've got to have training. We've got to fundraise and be good stewards. We've got to grow our party. We've got to communicate a vision for where we are today, but where we want to go. We need to engage all Georgians. And this is a center-right state. It's a center-right nation. And we've got to connect with those individuals all across the board and do it consistently. When I met my wife and we first went out on our first date, can you imagine at the end of that date if I had said, Jennifer, will you marry me? How do you think that would have gone over? Not so good, right? One date, one dinner. It was an investment of time. She had to get to know me. I needed to get to know her. And it took many dinners, many dates. It was an investment. And just like I had to invest in her and she eventually said yes when I asked her to marry her, if we want people to be a part of the Georgia Republican Party, and I'm talking about not just new folks, but people that have been around, if you want to keep them involved and engaged, you've got to invest in them. You've got to tell them what your vision, you've got to tell them what you want to do. You've got to work with them and make sure that they are valued. When they tell you something, and maybe it's criticism, you need to take that seriously and say, how can I improve upon what we're doing? We need to be grassroots. And when we work with business community, we're asking people to write checks to the Georgia Republican Party. And when we're working with our Republican elected officials, we need to do that, but we should not be beholden to any of them. There's no business interest that ought to be able to say, I'm writing you this check and now you're going to do what I say to do. There's no elected official, even our Republicans, and say, hey, I'm a Republican, so you're not ever supposed to challenge me if there's a disagreement based on the principles that we believe. We as the grassroots, we as the Georgia Republican Party have to be willing to stand independent of those other entities while still working with them. And when the things aren't right, we call them on it. When the business community wants a little too much influence, we have to say, no. This is the grassroots. This is the Republican Party. And we're going to stand tall and firm based on the fundamental principles that we believe in. And you need a leader that is part of the grassroots, that understands that relationship and is willing to stand and work with you each and every day. Now, I could talk so much longer. I've got so much in my heart about our party because of what I've seen and what I've experienced and my background and experience and what I know that I bring to the table. But I want to stop here now, and if we have time, I'd certainly be willing to answer any questions, get any feedback from you. I also want to just point to you, I've got some push cards here that have some of the information that I've talked about. I'll be releasing my website in the new week following the inauguration to keep you updated on what's going on. And if you're on social media, please connect with me. Additionally, my cell phone is in my pocket here. If you want to call me, if you don't already have my number, I'll give that to you, because you ought to have access to me as your first vice chair. And most certainly, if I have the honor of serving as chairman, you should have access to me 24 hours a day. Call me anytime. So with that, any questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Mr. McNeely. Appreciate it.
Sure.
Sharing with us and some of your background and all, and for being willing to step forward into a leadership role at the state level. That's really appreciated too. And thank you for your service. And I just had a question about, my understanding is there is about 60 some odd lobbyists have been hired at the state level for the gambling lobby. Yeah. So I'm sure the temperature in this room is pretty much against that.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm really curious, if we were to elect you as our chairman, what role do you see the state party having in standing up against this very powerful lobby?
Right.
And what could you do you think, as a state chairman to help push against that?
No, yeah, the question was regarding how do we push back against these casino interests, and there being about 60 lobbyists or so that are going to be pushing for that. How do we as grassroots Republicans let people know where we stand? And I think one of the ways that we do that is we present the facts. What is it that happens in communities when you have casinos in your state? And then compare that to what we believe as Republicans, our fundamental principles. And also make sure people know who these lobbyists are. Let them know the committees in which the legislation has been assigned, and let them know when and how to be involved up close and personal. We do that because when you do that, you're informing the electorate, you're informing the grassroots, You're stating facts. You're not name calling or anything like that, but you're letting people know that we're watching. You're letting people know how they can get involved. And then when we do that, when we talk to our elected officials and the ones that are considering that legislation, say, hey, you're Republican, we as the party, we're going to support Republicans, but understand on this issue and on many others, we're going to present the facts and we're going to remind the grassroots of our party of what's going on and ensure that their voice is heard under that gold dome. So that at the end of the day, whatever's proposed, at the end of the day, we remain the state that is independent of those types of influences. And I'll tell you this, as other candidates come and talk to you, make sure you do your homework and make sure that your interest as the grassroots is being represented. Because, again, the Georgia Republican Party must remain grassroots. Yes, sir.
Let me just say that one of the gentlemen since your dad please spoke on the gambling, one of the gentlemen running for our state party chair, John Watson, is one of the lobbyists pushing that the casinos have hired. Now, he comes in and he talks a really good game, and a lot of people have said, I like this guy, I really like this guy. And then when you go back and allow them, like Michael said, do your research. We have gotten into trouble so many times by somebody who can get up and speak a good speech and not know what their background. But this guy, John Watson, and he is going to be supported by some other people in the county. I mean, in the state, it's pretty powerful people, but we just need to know that he is one of the lobbyists for the casinos.
Good, thank you, Nick.
Yes, sir.
Michael, I'm Rocky Swan. You and I
Yeah,
spoke on
yes.
the phone a couple of weeks back. I appreciated your call.
Yes, sir.
My question is relative to fundraising.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder what background and experience you have in fundraising,
Mm-hmm.
and what connections do you have?
Sure.
Because I do feel that right now that might be the most critical issue in our party.
Well, no, I appreciate the question. So the question was, Michael, what is your experience, background with fundraising, some of the relationships you may have? Yeah, and that's an excellent question. And one of the things is that, the party, as I said, it's not perfect. We've done a lot of good things, but there are things that we've had challenges on, and one of them being fundraising. But at the same time, and I have upset John Padgett, our current chair, many times when I've challenged him on things, on issues, as well as his executive director. But while I challenged them on issues that I felt we were deficient in, at the same time, I was also helping to make the party better. So I was making, and still am making, fundraising calls to the individuals that have donated to the party over the years, and getting an idea of what their perspective is on, especially the ones that aren't giving right now. And so many of them said that I'm just not going to give right now under the current leadership because I don't have confidence there. They've seen the racial discrimination lawsuit. They've seen us file late with Secretary of State's office. They see that there's not a clear vision being articulated consistently. And they say, when you have your elections, we'll revisit that. So calling those individuals and talking to them about why they're not being involved and ensuring them that there's a new day coming, there's a new direction we're going in. And also, again, back to what I was saying earlier, people invest based off of what they see. What do they see coming out of the party? Is the leader of the party somebody that gets the respect across all the different factions of the party with the business community as well as legislators? And I can tell you that I have a great relationship with a lot of good conservative Republicans around the state. Right here in your backyard, Representative Micah Gravely is supporting me for state party chairman. He's one of my biggest supporters. And there are others around the state like him that I have a relationship with and I'm working with, because we shouldn't just be inviting our elected officials to come speak at a chicken dinner. How are we going to work with them to help them, but for them to also help us? And I've had conversations about that. So if I'm successful and the grassroots elects me, we're going to start having very strategic meetings about how we specifically work together to do that. And one of those goes back to the point I was making about educating the grassroots, because And I'll tell you, Democrats do this. They put out emails. Every time Republicans say something that they don't like, they put out a fundraising email and ask for dollars. Or they'll give quotes from what we're saying. They'll give facts about what we're doing on our side. And so we have to continually educate and work with representatives like Micah about what he's pushing, what he's working on from a conservative standpoint in the legislature, and how we can help him be successful with that based on principles that we believe in. Business community, I've had several meetings with some of our business interests around the state. And I occasionally go to the chamber meetings in Cobb. I was at an event right before the legislative session in downtown Atlanta, and I've been talking to those individuals along the way, well before I even thought about running for first vice chair, to build those relationships and to work together to help grow our party. And I'll tell you this, is that we've left some dollars on the table where we haven't been aggressive enough in saying, listen, whoever it is that we're asking to write the check, let me meet with you. Let me have coffee with you. Let's have lunch and talk specifically. What is it that you're looking for when you write the check to the Georgia Republican Party? And how can we work together to promote our mutual interests? And that has been happening consistently and effectively for the last few years. And when we are successful, as I believe we will be, then we'll be able to implement the fundraising at a level that we haven't in a while, because we'll be bringing people back that just haven't been willing to support us in the last few years. I hope that addresses your question. Okay, thank you. Yes, sir.
So I have kind of two questions, but I'll try to blend them into one. So
Okay.
what were some of the influences on you as maybe a younger man to get involved in the Republican Party? And what are some things that younger people like myself,
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
what we can do to, as you know, I mean, most people my age are probably, Bernie Sanders supporters, Hillary Clinton supporters. What is the best thing we can do to try to appeal to them and help them see the error of their ways?
No, great question. So part of that were, what are some of the influences that I've had over the years in my becoming a Republican? Well, it all began with the church, being a good steward, being humble, respecting other people, taking care of yourself, not depending on someone else, working hard. All those fundamentals are in Scripture. And so my example of seeing the church and the life of Christ, that's the number one focus that I've had, because then when I had that foundation as a young boy, then I looked at the principles of the Republican Party and I realized the connection.
Right.
And so that was first and foremost. And I mentioned scouting and that focus being on God and country, another huge influencer. And then I just took the time to research the parties myself. I bought a book on politics and government, and reading in the chapters related to the political parties, and all the issues we're still talking about today, marriage and national defense and taxes and education, all those things. And I realized my checks were on the Republican side. The Democrat side was like null and void. And so it's like a rubber band. Once it's stretched, it never goes back to its original shape. So once I realized that, then I was forever changed. And so then I got involved in my local party, and then I started seeing examples of a Dr. Thomas Sowell, prolific conservative thinker, awesome man. Walter Williams is another one, an economist. Then I started watching, people like Sean Hannity and other folks, and then it just strengthened what I already realized, and then I just went from there. And then you talked about young people being involved. You mentioned about a lot of young people supporting Bernie Sanders in the election. Well, we can have the greatest principles, and we do. We can have all the examples in the world about why they work for Americans, young and old, black, white, Asian, Hispanic, Indian, whoever you want to talk about. But it goes back to, how are we specifically engaging with younger people? And I think one of the things that the party has to do, because we'll ask college Republicans and young Republicans to come help us do door-to-door and phone banking during election time, but then it's like, okay, we'll see you next election. But what are we doing in between time? I think part of the solution is identifying, whether it be our teen Republicans, our college Republicans, young Republicans, make sure that the state party has a database of the membership within those organizations. And if, for example, college Republicans, what are your interests? What do you want to do after college? Are you going to be staying in Georgia? Are you planning to move outside the state? What type of work are you looking to do? Do you want to still be involved in the party? And track your progress through the college Republicans, get you involved, but then see how do we marry what you want to do in the future with the interests of the Georgia Republican Party? Because you may want to be a legislator one day. You may want to work for the governor. Whatever it is, it goes back to the state party and its chairman having a hand on the pulse of what's going on. So it's not enough just for Michael McNeely to speak at the college Republican meeting, but I need to know who those members are, their background and interests, and how do we specifically tie them in and connect them into what we're doing as Georgia Republicans. Yes, sir. Yeah, sure.
How do you see the minority population in Georgia as far as getting more educated about the Republican Party and getting involved in the Republican Party?
Sure, and I've got a lot of years of experience with that. As I mentioned, I was chairman of the Georgia Black Republican Council, and I've been working with our minority engagement team at the Georgia Republican Party currently. We had an event, for example, at a historically black college, Payne College in Augusta, Georgia, and brought in C.L. Bryant. How many of you all know C.L. Bryant? Okay, not enough of you, but I'm glad for the ones that do. C.L. Bryant was a pastor in Louisiana, and he let everybody know he was a Republican, and he lost his church. Can you imagine that? Lost his church. And subsequently, he did a documentary called Runaway Slave, and I want to encourage you to see that. It's excellent. It talks about the contrasts between the Republican Party and its history and the Democrats, and incorporates history as well as current day young minorities that are Republicans. Well done, well done. And I was in that as well. And helped critique that work and bring it to the final product. And in fact, I was with C.L. Bryant just this week. He was in Athens with the Republican women of Northeast Georgia, and he was talking about another project that he's working on that we're going to be working with him on. So doing those types of things, documentaries, going to historically black colleges and talking about what we believe. And when we had that event at Payne, I mean, there were people from all walks of life that most certainly were not categorized as Republicans, but they came and heard our message because we focused on ideas, principles. We weren't attacking Democrats, and we weren't in there with pom-poms saying, hey, we're Republicans. But we were talking about ideas, and when you do that, I think that helps bring people's guards down because they're not offended. Because listen, I got a lot of criticism as it relates to Obama. But if I went out there calling Obama names, I'm not winning over anybody. Because some people take that like, that's my brother, that's my mom, that's my dad, or what. I mean, take it personally like you're talking about some of your members of your family. But if you talk about ideas, and here's an example in Georgia with school choice and the charter school amendment. You had bipartisan support of that initiative because it was based on conservative principles and ideas that you should not be locked into a school based on your zip code, but based on what is in the best interest of your children. When you talk like that and you go to where people are, because they're not going to all be coming to these meetings, and you go there and you get to know them and they get to know you, you win the day. One of the things that I've been working on is I'm a member of a fraternity, a predominantly black fraternity, and working with other black fraternities and sororities. If I ran for governor tomorrow, those individuals within those organizations would support me because of the relationship. And because they know even if we don't agree on every single thing, they know that I have their best interests at heart. So we have to go where people are, do it consistently, focus on the issues and the principles and not personal attacks, and that will win the day. And that's what we've been doing for a lot of years in my roles within the party, and we're going to continue to do that. And understand, finally, at this point, is that I can't just go to the black community and talk to them. You have to go with me. They have to see that we're all together and see the common bond that we have as conservative Republicans. And we're going to work on that, and we're going to invest in that because you have to give the resources needed to do that consistently. One other thing, and see, I can go for days because it's in my heart. This is these things I believe. When Governor Deal ran for re-election, he came to my church of 4,000 seat sanctuary, 20,000 members. And my pastor never lets candidates talk from the pulpit or anything. But he allowed Governor Deal to talk because I asked him to, and because he was talking about juvenile and adult reform, criminal justice reform. And he talked about what the impact was for communities, a lot of folks in the black community, and he got a standing ovation. Not because those people were Republicans, but because of the principles and policy that we understand and know that work, and it won the day, and we'll keep doing that. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I recently moved here about 2 or 3 months ago. I was actually from Washington State. So, you know, one of the few ones that actually voted
Yeah.
on the other side. I've always been, like, my father actually served with the DHS during the inauguration. So, yeah, but you are right with the grassroots, because once again, I've come from a state where it is very much, the politics are so one-sided that it's not even funny. I mean, so you would see like locals, you know, locals in smaller communities. Yeah, they were the ones who stood up, but otherwise, in the larger scale, people get, well, you know, stomped out one way or another. So yeah, I've seen it. It is important, how it is important, and even with the gambling thing, I mean, honestly, you just have to take a look at the reservations or other places where it's legal in my state, my old state. It's not a pretty picture.
No.
But yeah, I mean, the grassroots community approach and just, you know, frontline approach is a good idea, I think.
Right,
Just
great.
From an outsider, from a new outsider perspective.
Well, we welcome you to Georgia. Glad that you're here and glad that you see the connection. Because regardless of where you're from, and you coming from Washington State, regardless of where you're from, those conservative principles transcend different states and communities, and they work for everybody. Yes, ma'am.
Just a quick one, you were talking about going through pain. In my favorite college, Georgia Tech, I've heard that they are restricting the college Republican group on what they can do.
Yeah.
How can we address that?
Yeah, and the question was around how do we address the fact that a lot of universities are restricting people's speech, and most specifically to conservative Republicans. How can we combat that? Well, we have to bring a spotlight to it. You know, because you think about all the news that goes on every day, and there's only a certain amount of time that can be addressed to each issue through the media. And then with the media being largely liberal, then they're going to have a slant that doesn't represent us very well. So we have to put a spotlight on that. You know, let's look at specific examples of what's going on. Let's see who is involved there at Georgia Tech, college Republicans, for example. Who are the individuals that are there that we can work with to say, what's the truth? And let's put together a position paper. Let's put together some highlights or bullets that we can send out to the grassroots. Because, again, you don't have to live in Metro Atlanta area to be interested in that issue and know how important it is that Republicans support the conservatives that are there. So you can be in Macon, you can be in Warner Robins, you can be down in Bullitt County somewhere, but when you hear about that, and that's the part of the state party's responsibility that they enable you to hear about that, then we can say, how do we help? And the state party can say, well, listen, we'll pay for 10 vans to ship some good Republicans from South Georgia to come up here and help put together a rally against that foolishness. The state party has to remain relevant by connecting us. And we connect us through our candidates, we connect us through issues like you're talking about. Yes, ma'am.
First, I'm going to kind of make a statement, but then see how it ties
Sure.
into what we think we could do at the state party.
Right.
I actually work a lot on weekends, and pretty much the guys that know me here for a while have been involved since actually my first mass precinct meeting was when Obama got elected, so it was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And so, kind of new, I guess, only 8 years, but just hearing through the grapevine and missing a lot of the meetings this past year, I heard that like people in our leadership were not saying great things and kind of turned off a lot of the Trump supporters. They're not here. Of course, January is a bad month. It's a very low meeting. I was actually kind of surprised it's kind of low here, and I'm thinking it's probably statewide that a lot of this is happening. It's not anything just for Paulding County. I know that a lot of the really strong Cruz supporters with clashes with the Trump supporters are no longer have any interest in attending the meetings. I mean, they like put it on Facebook. It was obvious. I heard that leadership was, like I said, putting down Trump supporters, and some of them aren't going to be coming anymore. Maybe, I know that happened. This was probably the most polarizing election for any of us. I know that in our local party, we had a state representative election 4 or 5 years ago that tore our party apart. A lot of people left. And I'm just curious, if you hear that happening at like the local county level, if leadership is tearing it down, what can the GOP at the state level do, or should they? And better yet, what can we do as individuals and encourage the growth in the local parties, as opposed to us tearing each other apart, and then basically after every election cycle, whether it be presidential or whether it be a local, like I said, a state rep race or a Senate race or whatever, what can we do to, not have to basically start over from ground zero after every election because we just decimated each other?
Right. How are we unified? How we bring people back that, weren't on board for Trump and, and some of these other issues? Well, it goes back, some of it, to what I said is that I have been able to bring different factions together in my run for first vice chair. Part of the way I did that was listening, as I mentioned earlier, understanding where each group of people are coming from and finding common ground. You've got to focus on the big picture. If you get caught up in every bit of detail, listen, we're unique men and women. None of us are the same. There is no way, and you wouldn't want it, for us to agree on everything in the same way. Our founders disagreed and argued. And when they came up with the Constitution, when they wrote the Declaration of Independence, there wasn't 100% unity on every little detail. But they focused on the big picture. They knew that we needed to create a more perfect union. We needed to not be trapped by a king and his way of doing business. We had to be independent from that. We had to form a country, and we had to have certain principles. So we had to be able to get beyond worrying about everything being exactly perfect the way we see it as individuals and understand the bigger picture. And so we have to do that right here. Where do we find the common ground? When you talk about Donald Trump and you talk to folks that supported other candidates, he's going to be able to nominate conservative Supreme Court justices that speak on a number of issues, religious liberty and property rights and right to life issues. We need that. When we talk about keeping businesses here in the United States of America, Carrier, for example, Donald Trump questioned, some of the relationships in the contract related to building a new Air Force One. I mean, doing those things works in our interests. So people have to be willing to see that big picture and know that it was Hillary Clinton or it's our nominee, and respect the process and know that people had a choice of the matter. Majority went with Donald Trump. And if they don't like something that he's doing, then you can challenge him on it. But understand that it shouldn't be us fighting against ourselves. It is the liberal progressives that we're fighting against and their agenda and how it was going to tear down our country. So I think you find that common ground, you communicate that, you bring leadership in from the different groups, and you bring them together and force people to talk and force people to work together. And that starts from your leadership at the chairman's level. Because otherwise, some leaders will just stand back and say, well, you guys deal with it. But in all of this, there is a role that the chairman plays and the state party plays, but we have to work together. There's no one person that can do it all. Because if you're not doing your part, it's not going to work no matter what I do or anybody else does. And so I think that listening, respecting, focus on the big picture will go a long way with that. And I don't want to take too much of the time, but I'm always glad to answer questions.
10 o'clock, so is there one more question or any more?
I just want to say one thing. It's kind of a statement thing that's really good for us to, first of all, as far as our state party. We're going to be on this stage in this country because right now we have 2 cabinet positions on Donald Trump's team. I also heard that our Supreme Court Justice, Keith Blackwell, is on the short list. So the Supreme Court nominee may also come from Georgia. And as we know ourselves, one of our own here now is on the White House Council with Stephen Passantino, which I love Stephen. So we're going to be on the center stage here in this country. So we do have to elect good leaders that knows how to keep our party united. Yeah, I was a Rubio supporter. I could care. I did. It was during the primary. I hated Cruz people. I hated Trump people.
She's not lying.
I will fight for my candidate. But when it was all over with, I worked for Trump.
Yes, you did.
Yeah.
I worked for Trump, and the Trump people know that I came together and I worked, because that's what we do.
That's right.
What you have to do. Fight for your candidate during the primary, turn it loose, and go work for the better good. Because as I tell people, the alternative was bad.
Yes.
Trump is already doing stuff just with his cabinet positions, we see, wow, already. And then.
It's vice president.
Huh? It's
Vice
vice president.
president.
Oh my
Right.
gosh,
Yeah.
couldn't he have gotten
Yeah.
a better vice president?
Right.
So, I mean, we already see some of this good stuff, and, you know, and when you hear rumors out there that, oh, this person's trashing it, leadership's trashing me, leadership doesn't like me, there's two sides to every story.
Right.
And don't tear a party apart because you hear just some one person's side. Have an open mind to know that there's two sides to every story.
Right, and that's right. There's two sides to every story. And I'll tell you, I was thinking about something when you were saying that, is that with the state party structure, when you run for chairman, when you run for first vice, we're not running on a ticket. Everybody's an individual. And when you look at the state party rules, the power is within the position of the state party chairman. If you look at the role of first vice chair in the rules, it's about this long. It basically says that the first vice chair will serve in the absence of the chairman, and they will do whatever is assigned to them by the chairman. So when people want to blame the first vice chair for all the woes, understand that that one position cannot change what we need changed. It's the person in the chairmanship that can do that. And so it's very important that we vote for a good grassroots conservative that can lead us into the future. Thank you so much for having me today. It's been a pleasure. Thank you all.
You're very welcome. Thank you. That was awesome.